Ash and Ember. For everyone who's ever rebuilt from the ashes, the desert was the color of old bone when Claire Ashford rode in. Her horse moved slow, hooves sinking in dust fine as flour, the horizon rippling with heat. The sun pressed down without mercy, and the only thing that moved faster than the wind was the ache in her chest. She'd been riding 3 days since leaving Santa Fe. 3 days since she stopped pretending there was anything left to go back to. The town ahead didn't look like much. A handful of buildings crouched around a dry well, a church steeple leaning tired against the sky. A crooked sign read Gallows Creek. Someone had shot out the G. It swung by one nail, creaking, spelling Allows Creek. The name felt like a warning. Claire reined in near the saloon. The front porch sagged, and the piano inside was missing a few notes. She tied her mare to the post and stepped down, dust rising around her boots. The air smelled of whiskey, sweat, and the faint sweetness of mesquite smoke. A man spitting tobacco from the porch looked her over, his eyes sliding from her boots to the revolver at her hip. "Afternoon, so," he said. "You lost?" "Don't reckon so. Women riding in alone out here usually are." She met his stare until he looked away. "I'm not most women." Inside, the saloon was dim and cooler than she expected. A few miners hunched over cards. A barkeep polished a glass that was already clean. And in the corner, a piano player coaxed out a tired waltz. Claire crossed to the bar. "Room?" she asked. The barkeep nodded toward the stairs. "2 bits a night. Cheaper if you don't mind the noise." "I've slept beside worse." She slid a coin across the counter. He caught it, studied her a second longer. "You looking to stay a while?" "I'm looking for work," she said, "or a place quiet enough to stop remembering." That shut him up. He handed her a key and pointed to a door at the end of the hall. The room was small, the window cracked, the bed clean enough. Claire set her saddlebag on the chair, took off her hat, and stared at her reflection in the warped mirror. The woman looking back had sunburn on her cheekbones and a thin white scar running from jaw to throat. A souvenir from a fire that had eaten her home a year ago. It still smelled like smoke sometimes when she dreamed. Her husband, Daniel Ashford, had died in that fire trying to pull their little girl from the flames, both gone before she'd made it back with the bucket from the well. She'd buried what was left under a cottonwood and ridden west because there was nothing left east of that grave but ghosts. The mirror wavered. Maybe it was her eyes. She splashed her face with the basin water, rubbed her hands dry on her trousers, and went back downstairs. By then, the saloon had filled with evening noise, laughter, poker chips, the clink of bottles. A rough-looking group at the corner table went silent as she passed. Men who worked mines long enough to lose color in their eyes. One of them, tall, unshaven, wearing a black duster, watched her with the kind of quiet that felt heavier than talk. He didn't leer, didn't look away either. The barkeep nodded towards him. "That's Carter," he said under his breath. "Ranch hand, used to be law, some say. Keeps to himself." "Good," Claire said, taking her coffee to a table near the window. "So do I." Outside, dusk folded over the desert, purple bleeding into rust. The wind carried the smell of rain that never came. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled, like a warning shot. She was halfway through her coffee when 2 men stumbled in, drunk enough to forget the rules. One wore a sheriff's badge that had lost its shine. The other carried a grin, sharp as a blade. They saw her, and the grin deepened. "Well now," the sheriff drawled, "ain't often we get a lady in town. You passing through or settling in?" "Drink your drink, Sheriff," the barkeep said quietly. "She ain't here for talk." The grin turned mean. "You talking for her, Tom?" Claire stood, slow. "I can talk for myself." "Then say something sweet." She didn't. Instead, she placed a silver coin on the table and said, "I paid for quiet." The sheriff stepped closer. "Ain't much quiet out here, ma'am." That's when the man in the black duster, Carter, rose from his chair. He didn't reach for his gun, just said calm and low, "Sheriff, let the lady be." The room went still. The piano stopped. For a long heartbeat, the sheriff stared at him. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. "Didn't know you was the chivalrous type, Carter." "I ain't," Carter said. "Just don't like watching stupid." Something in his tone made the sheriff think twice. He tipped his hat toward Claire, muttered something, and left with his friend trailing behind. The noise of the saloon crept back in fits. Claire sat again, heart still thudding. Carter picked up his whiskey, nodded once to her, and went back to his corner. When the night thinned out and only the wind stayed, Claire went upstairs. She shut the door, leaned her back against it, and exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. She told herself she'd ride on in the morning, that this place was just another stop between then us and nowhere. But as she lay down, she caught the faint sound of the piano below. A soft tune played for no one. It reminded her of Daniel, of laughter before the fire, of promises made in rooms full of sunlight. She turned her face to the wall, eyes open in the dark, and whispered the name she hadn't spoken since that night. The desert wind answered with silence. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time, and in the corner of the saloon, Carter kept playing until the storm broke. Morning came gray and heavy. The storm had left mud in the streets and a clean smell in the air. Claire woke before sunrise, restless. She dressed, tied her hair back, and stepped out onto the porch. The boards were damp, the sky pale as tin. Across the street, Carter was stacking crates behind the saloon, sleeves rolled, shirt clinging from the rain. He saw her watching and tipped his hat, a quiet acknowledgement, neither invitation nor dismissal. She returned it and started toward the stable. "Horse still lame?" he asked when she passed. "Just tired," she said. "We both are." He nodded. "Name's Eli Carter. You?" "Claire." He waited as if she might give more. When she didn't, he said, "You plan on staying long, Claire?" "Depends if this place minds a woman earning her keep." "Depends how you aim to earn it," he said, then softened his voice. "There's ranch work north of town. Widow runs it with 2 boys. Always needs help come spring." She studied him. "You vouch for her?" "I do." "Then maybe I'll ride out there tomorrow." He smiled faintly. "You got grit. Not many come this far alone." Claire shrugged. "Not many have reason to." The day stretched long and slow. She helped the barkeep mend a broken hinge, then scrubbed tables in exchange for supper. By nightfall, she'd made herself useful enough that no one looked twice when she moved through the saloon. Eli came in near dusk, mud on his boots, hat in hand. He ordered whiskey, stood near the stove until the warmth found his bones. When his eyes lifted, they met hers. There was something about his gaze, steady, measuring, the kind of quiet that hides history. He raised his glass slightly. She nodded, kept wiping the counter. Later, when the piano stilled and the crowd thinned, he said, "I could use a hand tomorrow. Fence work out by the creek. Pays fair. Thought you said the widow needed help." "She does, but her fences don't mend themselves." She weighed the offer, then said, "I'll come. Sun up then." He left with that, simple as a handshake. And for the first time in months, Claire found herself almost looking forward to morning. They worked in silence most of the next day. The land rolled out dry and wide, grass whispering in the wind. Eli showed her how to stretch wire without cutting her hands, how to test a post for rot. He didn't talk about himself, and she didn't ask. It was a rhythm she understood. Labor as language. At noon, they rested under a cottonwood, sharing water and shade. He offered her jerky. She took it, chewing slow. "You used to be law," she said finally. He looked out toward the hills. Was, till it stopped meaning much. "What happened?" He hesitated, jaw tight. "Lost a boy in a shootout. My fault. Badge didn't make that right." Claire nodded, eyes on the dust between them. "I know something about blame that won't wash off." He glanced at her hand where the scar ran white against her skin. "Fire?" She nodded once. "Lose someone?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. They sat in quiet until the wind picked up again, carrying the smell of rain and old sorrow. By the time they rode back, dusk had fallen soft and blue. Gallows Creek looked smaller in that light, almost kind. Eli handed her half the pay without a word. She looked at the coins, then at him. "You didn't have to." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I did." She pocketed the money. "You're a hard man to read, Carter." "Better that way," he said. "Folks don't get disappointed." She studied him a moment longer. "You ever think about leaving this place?" "Every damn day." "Then why stay?" He looked toward the dark horizon. "Because sometimes running don't change what's chasing you." That night, back in her room, Claire couldn't shake the echo of his words. She lay awake listening to the desert wind slip through the cracks and wondered if maybe she'd stopped running long enough to face what still burned behind her. A week passed. Work gave her shape again, something to wake for, something to end with tired hands. She learned to patch fences, brand cattle, and read the shifting moods of Eli Carter. He spoke little but listened like a man who'd been hungry for company too long. One evening, when the sun dropped behind the mesas and turned the sky blood orange, they rode back side by side. Claire caught him watching her, not bold, just steady. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just good to have someone who don't fill the quiet with noise." She smiled, small and unexpected. "Maybe quiet's all I've got left." He looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. "No, Claire. You've still got fire." The words sat between them, warm and dangerous. Neither spoke again until they reached town. When she dismounted, she felt her pulse still racing, and for the first time since the fire, it wasn't from fear. For 3 days, Gallows Creek baked under a sky the color of a spent bullet. The wind died, the river shrank to a ribbon of brown water, and tempers cracked like dry boards. Men argued over cattle and cards. Women prayed for rain that never came. Claire kept working the widow's ranch beside Eli. The heat burned through her hat brim and into her bones. She told herself the sweat running down her spine was just from the sun, not from the slow pull of wanting something she shouldn't. That evening, when the first dust devil rose, Eli said, Storm's coming." She squinted toward the horizon. "Don't look like rain." "It ain't." He meant fire. She could smell it then. Faint, cruel, familiar. Smoke threading through the sage. Her heart lurched. "Where?" she asked. "North Ridge. If the wind turns, it'll hit the ranch by dawn." She swallowed hard. "Then we'd better start digging." They worked until their hands bled, shoveling a trench around the barn, soaking the roof with what water was left. Claire moved like a woman possessed, her muscles remembering the rhythm of desperation. Eli kept pace beside her, saying nothing. When the flames finally showed themselves, orange tongues licking the night sky, Claire froze. The sound alone dragged her back through time. Screams, collapsing beams, the smell of her husband's hair catching fire. She tasted ash and memory. "Claire!" Eli's voice cut through it. "Stay with me." She blinked, forced herself to breathe. "I'm here." He gripped her shoulder, rough but steady. "Good. Keep that line wet. We hold it or we lose everything." So they fought. The fire came fast, crawling over the ridge like a living thing. Sparks rained across the corral, catching fence posts, setting the sky alight. Claire swung the bucket again and again until her arms trembled. Eli shouted orders through the roar. The widow's boys ran for the animals, faces streaked with soot. The world turned to smoke and heat. Time lost its shape. By midnight, the fire had passed, leaving a scorched halo around the ranch. The barn still stood, half-charred but upright. The widow's youngest cried into her apron. The oldest stared at the black line where their pasture used to be. Claire stood apart, chest heaving, hands raw. Eli walked over, eyes rimmed red from smoke. "You all right?" he asked. She laughed once, hoarse. "You ever see someone die in a fire, Carter?" He didn't answer. "My husband did," she said quietly. "Our little girl, too. I tried to save them. Couldn't. Been running from that night ever since." Eli looked at her a long moment, then said, "You didn't run tonight." Something in her broke at that. Not the same break as before, a softer one, like a knot loosening. She sat down in the ash and cried until the tears left tracks on her face. Eli didn't speak. He just sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, both of them staring at the ruin and the first stars coming through the smoke. When dawn came, the world smelled like wet cinders. Claire's hands were blistered, her throat raw. Eli was already awake, feeding the horses that had survived. He handed her a tin cup of coffee. "You saved that barn," he said. "We saved it." He shook his head. "You could have run. You didn't. That matters." She met his gaze. "You talk like a man who's needed saving." He half smiled. "Maybe I did." They stood there for a while, the silence easy between them. The sun rose slow, throwing gold across the blackened fields. "I think I'm done running," she said at last. Eli nodded. "Then stay." That night, back in town, Claire sat outside the saloon watching embers drift from the stovepipe. Her whole body ached, but inside there was a strange calm, like something finally settled. Eli came out, two mugs in hand. He passed one to her and leaned against the railing. "What now?" she asked. "Rebuild," he said. "Always do." She looked at him, at the way the lamplight caught the scars on his knuckles, the gentleness that didn't match his rough edges. "You're a good man, Eli Carter." He huffed a small laugh. "You don't know me that well." "I know enough." He turned to her then, slow, deliberate. "Then you know what this is?" "I do." And when he kissed her, quiet, certain, tasting of smoke and rain, she didn't flinch. For the first time since the fire, she let herself be warm. Morning light cut through the haze like forgiveness. Gallows Creek woke slow, smoke still clinging to the air, the town moving softer than usual, as if everyone knew how close the fire had come. Claire walked down to the well with a bucket in each hand. Her shoulders ached, but the weight felt clean. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking from nightmares. She was waking into something real. Eli waited by the hitching post, hat pulled low, sleeves rolled. When he saw her, a faint smile tugged at his mouth. "You sleep?" he asked. "Enough," she said. "You're tougher than you look." "Maybe," she said, lowering the bucket. "Or maybe I just ran out of ways to break." He didn't argue. Instead, he reached to help her lift the full pail, fingers brushing hers just long enough to remind her what it felt like to be touched, without pity. The days after the fire blurred into work. Fences to mend, cattle to find. Folks from town rode out with tools and water, helping patch what the flames had taken. Claire threw herself into it. Every nail, every board, another small defiance against what she'd lost before. Eli worked beside her. They didn't talk much, but the quiet between them had changed. It wasn't distance anymore. It was something waiting to grow. That evening, they rode back together, both covered in dust. The sun fell low behind the hills, painting the world in red and gold. Claire said, "You ever think about starting over?" He gave her a look. "You mean leaving?" "No," she said. "I mean staying somewhere long enough to make it yours." He was quiet for a while, then said, "Didn't think I'd earned that yet." "You just did," she said. Later that night, the saloon was almost empty. The piano sat silent. Eli poured two drinks and handed her one. "To what?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "To what's left." She clinked her glass against his. "And to what comes next?" They drank. The lamplight flickered across his face, softer than she'd ever seen him. He reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I've been sure a long time. Just forgot how to feel it." He kissed her then, slow, grounding, the kind that didn't rush or promise too much, only enough. She leaned into it, into him, into the strange, steady truth of being held and not burned. They stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing. Outside, wind rattled the shutters, carrying the scent of rain. The real kind this time. When it came, gentle and patient, they stood on the porch and watched the drops turn dust to mud. Claire tilted her face up, eyes closed. "Smells clean." Eli nodded. "Maybe the land needed it. Maybe we did too." He slipped an arm around her shoulders, and she let him. No grand declarations, no promises carved in stone. Just the quiet knowing that after everything burned down, something still stood. The next morning, the widow came to the saloon with news. The ranch would rebuild, and she wanted both Claire and Eli to stay on to help. There'd be room for them, real work, real ground beneath their feet. Claire looked at Eli. "What do you think?" He smiled faintly. "I think it's about time we stopped running and started planting." She reached for his hand, their fingers rough and sure. "Then let's build something worth keeping," she said. And for the first time since the night of the fire, she meant every word. 5 years later, the desert bloomed. The rains had come back that spring, filling the gullies with green and coaxing wildflowers out of ground that had once been ash. Gallows Creek had grown some too. New roofs, painted doors, laughter spilling from the saloon on Saturday nights. Claire stood on the porch of the small ranch house she and Eli had built with their own hands. The boards were sun-faded, the porch swing creaked, and it was perfect. Behind her, a child laughed, a bright, wild sound that still startled her sometimes with its beauty. Little Anna Carter came running out, curls bouncing, clutching a fistful of yellow daisies. "Mama, look!" Claire knelt. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." Anna grinned, pressing the flowers into her hand. "Papa said we can ride to town after lunch." Claire smiled toward the barn, where Eli was tightening a saddle strap. "Did he now?" Eli looked up at the sound of their voices, his face breaking into that same quiet smile that had undone her the first time she saw it. He walked over, wiping his hands on a rag, the sun catching silver in his hair. "She's been at me all morning about those wild horses near the creek," he said. "Told her she's not near big enough for chasing mustangs." Anna crossed her arms in perfect imitation of her mother. "I'm almost 5, Eli chuckled. "Almost, huh?" Claire stood, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Let her come. The world's safer when she's got both of us watching it." He nodded. "Wouldn't argue that." As they saddled up, Claire looked out at the land, the same land that once tried to burn her down. Now it carried new grass, a new home, a daughter born of second chances. The air smelled of sage and sunlight. Eli helped Anna onto the horse, then met Claire's eyes. "You ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Every now and then, but not the way I used to." He tilted his head. "How's that?" "I used to think it was the end," she said. "Now I know it was just the beginning." They rode out together, the three of them, toward the open hills. The wind tugged at Claire's hair, the sun warm on her shoulders. The past was still there, but softer now, its edges worn down by time and love and small, ordinary days. Eli reached for her hand across the space between their horses. She took it, fingers interlacing, rough skin to rough skin. Behind them, Anna's laughter rose bright against the morning sky. For a long moment, Claire let it all sink in. The smell of dust, the rhythm of hooves, the simple, staggering fact of being alive. She turned to Eli, smile slow and certain. "Guess we finally found home." He squeezed her hand. "Yeah," he said, "we did."